Okay, welcome back. And this video is the Concatenate the PTEO. What this video really is going to do is start to show in Excel how we take related information and add it to data to integrate it and make for much better reporting. And also the way that we're dealing with dual processing systems is we're putting it together, one definition that you can look at. So whether you call it your address directory, each line, a PSR or a PTEO, it is all those common data elements that you would normally look at to try to define, okay, why is that money in commitment or unpaid or obligation, or what program is that affecting? So all of these symbols, so PEC, ESP code, EEC, sales code, all of those things mean something, so we've got to try to put them together, automate it so it's repetitive, so it's intuitive for you to go ahead and select what is the funds control level, what is the commodity, and then the reporting comes out looking nice and clean. So the first thing we want to do to each of these data sets is make sure we have some common data elements. Now in the template, and if you were to download it off the SharePoint, it's going to have these formulas in here. So BQSoft is the tab that I'm starting with, and I'm going to add these first two. I want to add the appropriation symbol to BQ, and then I want to add the object class to BQ as well. Now you may have noticed in Chris that there is an option to add an object class, but it doesn't have a decimal point or something like this. So we're going to head and use that crosswalk and just add it for you in this case. So let's go ahead and transpose those two headings. So we're going to add two columns to our dynamically expanding table, and I'm going to go ahead and copy this formula, and I'll explain what it is that this is doing. So this is going to do a VLOOKUP. We're going to flatten this table out or add that related information using a lookup in Excel. So what it's doing is saying, I'm going to highlight in here, go look at the fund code. If you're not familiar with lookups, go look at this fund code 56, and in the guard we would know that the appropriation symbol is 3850. Go look that up and return me what the value is from the other table. So look at that FC APPR table, return the value in column 2, and it must be an exact match. And if it's not and it returns an error, then give me a hint that says, hey, I need to update my fund code to appropriation table. So I'm going to hit enter, and you can see it fills it in down like that. Okay. The next one is going to be for the object class. Now we just have to get used to object class versus EEC. So if for no other reason we want to start seeing the two together, but also in the PTEO has the object class in there, so we need to start looking at that. So we're going to do the same type of thing. The first check, we're going to say if equal 5 is nothing. So in this case, if mil per, if it's nothing, then put in that 117 generic object class. If not, then go to that crosswalk table we've already got in our tables tab, and then return the correct object class. So we hit enter, and it fills it in like that. Okay, just that simple. If you were to find an error message or anything in here, you may need to update that table occasionally, pull it from DQS. It's not a problem at all to do that. Now the next thing that we're not going to take a huge amount of time, but we do need to understand this because this is a very big part of how this tool works. So concatenation is simply putting two things together. So I could do equals CON, and you can see it joins several text strings into one text string. I'm going to hit tab, and it's going to say give me text number 1. So I'm going to go ahead and select this guy right here, PEC, and then it's going to say, okay, put a comma in between your text values. So I'm going to say comma, and then I'm going to select project subproject, and then I'll close it off, the parenthesis, and hit enter. Now you can see what it did was just smashed them two together. So one part of it's nice because we have our PEC and our BPAC together. So that gives us more information than just one of the two by itself. It's a little hard to read, so what we can do is come back in here and I'm going to add another text. So text 1, text 2, text 3. So I'm going to add in here quote. If I put a quote in there, that means I'm going to do some text. I'm going to add some text. If I were to type a number in there without text or without the quotes, it's going to think it's a number. But if I put quotes in there, it's going to treat it as text. So what I'm going to do is just put a space. I can just put a space in there, and then another quote to close it, and then a comma. So you can see that if I select here, that's text 1. I'm going to select in between these commas, and that's text 2, and then here's text 3. So just doing that gives me a nice little space and something a little bit more readable. That's the entire idea behind the PTEO. When you get into Deems and you start entering forms, or in budget if you are reviewing forms, you're going to want to make sure that that PTEO is entered properly so that the money is executing against the right programs or lines of accounting or however you want to call it. So what we want to do is use what we're calling a PTEO as the baseline of our reporting, because if we know what's happening to our PTEOs, what's happening to our individual line items in our address directory, PSR level, PTEO, if we understand what's going on there, we're going to be able to track the funds that we have in execution much easier. So, and it's going to be intuitive again, as I say, instead of writing code or having to rewrite code. This is how we basically get around having to write code and still have the same functionality that you could get with a user-defined function, is what they would call it. So I'm going to add the PTEO to my data table. You can see it expands it again for me. And that same idea, now you'll want to study this concatenation if you care to. The idea behind this is I'm going to do what I did with that PEC and BPAC. I'm going to do that to a lot of different data elements. In fact, I'm going to do it to all the different data elements that I need to see to be able to be sure I know what's happening or what that line of accounting is. I can define it for sure. So here they are. Concatenate, the F, we put that in because the operating entity for the Air Force has an F in front of it. A is for Army because the entire DoD is going to SFIS. F is for the Air Force. So OAC, OBAN with an F in front, that's your operating entity. Fund code. The X's would be fiscal year, and we don't put a fiscal year in there because one, it would cause us to mandatorily update every year that these change over, and two, your operating year or your operating budget year or whatever it is, current fiscal year, that's going to be in your data, so we can always report based on something that's already in the data. So XX eliminates the need to work around or update PTEOs every year. Next, for this CRIS soft, we look at, is it direct or reimbursement, because Deems PTEOs, Deems has a very specific, hey, this is a reimbursement or direct. They're completely separate. So that's one thing we need to do here. Sales code or R1. Those are going to be reimbursements. If not, then direct. We add our PEC. We add our ESP code. We add the budget activity, project subproject, SAG, sales code, object class, and RCCC. And the way this flows is essentially like a PTEO flows. So as you can see here now, you'll want to note two things. The at OAC, at OBAN, at fund code. When you do this, if this doesn't say, like for instance, let's say your CRIS query says BPAC, that's the actual heading instead of project subproject, it's going to give you a hashtag ref error. In that case, you would come back in this formula and simply highlight the part where it said hashtag REF, replace it with that project subproject column in your data, and then it'll fix it. The other thing is this trim. Trim adds a lot of space to the formula, so it may be a little scary or something, but All it is that sometimes the data come in and there are spaces before or after the data, which you're not going to be able to know just by looking at it. Oh, there's a blank space there. So what trim does is it looks at the very first and the last part of that data, and then if there are empty spaces, it trims them off. So it allows for consistency for us. In the Deems data, we don't see that, but in BQ, or Chris, I should say, that it flows in through there, we do see that sometimes. So that's what the trim is. So at the end of the day, when we do that, this is what we end up with. And if you're familiar with Deems, this is going to look pretty familiar. If you're not on Deems yet, this is the general construct of a PTEO. So there's a blend and there's some other things, but if the idea here is that if I look at this or scroll down or look at any of these, I'm going to be able to tell you what that line of accounting is for, whenever money executes against it, what it's executing for, and I can further define it just in this one little cell. So that is the entire idea behind the PTEO, and we're going to show you when we define those and start reporting based upon those how powerful that can be. So we've defined the PTEO in this one. Let's go to the Deems soft as well. Oh, and by the way, because your status of funds in Deems and BQ, your address directory is encompassing of all the execution that you've done, it goes without saying that if you define your PTEOs and your status of funds, then you've further defined them all for every transaction that makes up your status of funds. So that is to say your selective transaction history or your general ledger, and that can be just as powerful in terms of reporting as well. So back to our formulas tab. We're going to do the same thing with our Deems, so I'm going to copy these three like I did before, and then go all the way to the end of our Deems status of funds, paste special, and transpose. So it's just going to rotate it 90 degrees for me, and then my table is going to expand automatically. And in Deems, if you're familiar, the PEC adds a 0 in between the first digit in the PEC, and that's for SFIS, and that's to provide for a standard way of looking at program element codes. The way we're setting up our PTEO, we don't really care to see the 0 in front or after, so that's what this formula is going to do for us. I'm just going to copy and paste it. Paste it in there. It says if program equals NA, because let's say there may have been a straight pay or not great validation or something. It may say NA. If it does, then just keep it as NA. If it doesn't, then what I want to do is go from the right left. So again, it's not like you're going to see this and get it. What it's going to do is just take the left 2 and then lop off the 1 on the right. Okay, and then it's going to take the right 5 and put it together. So I'm going to hit enter. Now that looks like our old legacy PECs, right? And so that formula is simply looking at this PEC and go, take the 0.5, and then of that 0.5 take the 5, and then slap on the right 5 as well, and then we get our legacy PEC. That's what that's doing. Alright, fund code, we're going to do the opposite of what we did before, and because we have to not look at the very first column like a VLOOKUP would do, in this case we're looking at the second column and trying to return the value from the first. We do an index and match, because VLOOKUP doesn't like to look right to left, it likes to look left to right. I prefer VLOOKUP whenever I can. Sometimes index and match is just much better or more flexible, so to speak. So I'm going to hit enter, and now in the Deems data where we never had a fund code, now we do, and we need that for our PTEO. And then the very last thing is this PTEO concatenation. I'm going to go ahead and come in here and copy and paste this into there. And again, same idea. And the object here, whenever we're putting these together, you see how it's highlighting every piece of this PTEO string that we're trying to join together, so that it's giving us as much information as possible the idea is the same, a consistent way to look at that line of accounting or PTEO so that we know how to define where our funds, programs, and whatnot are executing against. So that'll be it for this video. In the next video, we're going to go about showing you how we use this PTEO to intuitively define our lines of accounting for much more improved reporting. See you then.